Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cass and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about the Ducktales 2017 series finale, The Last Adventure. This is it. We're finally here, talking about the big finale. But let me ask you guys something first. You remember when Disney Channel shows used to get movies? It was pretty common back in the day. If a Disney show was popular enough, they get a chance to make a movie. Even the original DuckTales got a theatrical film. The reason I bring this up is because sometimes these movies would act as the series finale, or at least the intended series finale. One last big adventure unlike any other in the show to end a successful show with a bang. Sadly, Disney doesn't really do this anymore because they don't make nearly as many DCOMs as they did 10, 20 years ago, but I think the DuckTales crew approached this finale as if they did. An epic 3-part final adventure that debuted like a TV movie, which for a show as large and ambitious as the DuckTales reboot is probably what they needed to give it a satisfying conclusion. So, without any further ado, this is The Last Adventure. Val is ready to strike with their master plan to end all adventure and chaos, with Webby and Huey caught in the middle of their plans on their own quest for answers. To stop them, Scrooge McDuck and family will have to set out on their greatest adventure yet in the hopes that it won't be their last, despite what the title says. What gets across throughout the entirety of The Last Adventure is how, more than anything else, this is a celebration of the DuckTales reboot, of the places they've been, the stories they've told, and the friends and family they've made along the way. That approach to tackling saying goodbye to the show while celebrating what it's accomplished is evident right from the very beginning. The idea to use Webby's birthday party as an excuse to not just reunite as many characters as possible, but as a cover to Stormfowl's headquarters under Funzo's is a fantastic way to open this finale. On a story level, it's a good cover, it makes sense why so many different characters came together for this child's birthday party, and if any character was going to be completely okay with her birthday party being a fake out for an undercover mission, it was Webby. It's also a gift for the audience. Making the party and mission a big reunion for as many characters as possible gives almost every viewer a chance to see their favorite character one more time in a casual setting. I personally love seeing all the adult Duck cousins together again, and seeing the local superheroes hanging out was a real treat. While this first part is probably the calmest of the trilogy, the opening segment has two big things the rest of the finale does: non-stop action adventure, and a ton of callbacks. My personal favorite is that Huey got the plans for Fal's base from Launchpad sleep talking.
Launchpad's been talking in his sleep lately, in a British accent for some reason.
So, confession time. I'm not a big fan of the Double O Duck episode. At all. One of the reasons I disliked it is that Launchpad learns everything about Fowl's base right in Duckburg, but is too dumb to remember it once he's not the brilliant spy anymore. I know it's played as a joke, but it really rubbed me the wrong way at the time. But I do appreciate that that information wasn't completely lost, and while it's in a silly way, that spy identity of Launchpad's was able to get that important intel to the right source. Also, Dewey remembers where everything is down here, even though he still thinks he was in a video game. So that's cool. Maybe that episode wasn't as much of a waste as I thought. The mission to take down Fowl is a really fun opening to get the blood pumping for the finale, but in the end, it turns out to be fruitless. The base is empty of any trace of the fiendish organization. Well, they did leave a couple of specimens behind. Even in the series finale, DuckTales is not done introducing and rebooting characters. The Last Adventure becomes the DuckTales 2017 debut of May and June, originally Daisy's nieces, who were also triplets. From what I gather, they were basically the Chipettes to Huey, Dewey, and Louie. But here, they're clones made by Fowl, and there's only 2 of them. Huh. Wonder what happened to April. Maybe she was a failed experiment or something, doesn't matter. But not just clones of anyone, clones of Webby. Oh, so it was Webby's feather black hair and got during the sort of Swansonteen adventure, not Scrooge's. Okay. Like I said, a big part of this finale is callbacks to the rest of the series, but mostly from the first episode, which helps demonstrate the progression from that first episode to now. The best showcase of that is easily with May and June as Webby gets to know them. May and June are not just genetically Webby, they're in the same place she was when the series began, isolated from the world and now experiencing it for the first time, wanting to see more of it even as Beakley tells them to stay put. In the same dusty room the boys were put in when they first arrived at McDuck Manor. Cute. Seeing Webby with these girls who are a lot like she used to be gives us a really good look into how much her and the family have grown over the series, how much more she's seen and how many connections she's made, making the board of Scrooge's family into an extension of her own honorary family family tree. It's a really sweet way to show how much happier Webby is now. But then, May and June do something unprecedented. They ask about Webby's parents. A moment where, once again, DuckTales 2017 is asking the questions I'm sure longtime fans have been asking for a very long time now. From what I can tell, Webby's parents were never mentioned in the original series. Though, again, I'm not an authority on the original cartoon, I'm getting this information from people who have actually watched it. In true DuckTales reboot fashion, we're not just going to answer the questions surrounding Webby's family, but explore the implications that come with looking for these answers. Tensions rise as soon as these questions are asked, causing division in the family right away. Webby's ready to defend these girls she doesn't really know, and when Lena lashes out at June, Webby reprimands her for it. Seeing this disruption among the family, especially in Team Magic, definitely leaves an impact in the moment. Though it is a shame that where Lena and Webby are concerned, this never impacts the plot in a meaningful way afterwards. Heck, they never mention it again. I know there's a lot going on in this finale, but I think we could have spared a few seconds to resolve this conflict. As it is, this is technically the last conversation they have on screen. That's really weird. Webby becomes so fixated on wanting to find answers that she's shutting out everyone she usually trusts in favor of her so-called sisters. Not helped by the fact that the person she usually trusts more than anyone, who could give her all the answers she's looking for, Beakley, is still very secretive with her. Very obviously lying about her parents' fate to keep her from investigating all this further, which, as we learned back in season 1, is clearly a successful strategy. I'm sure Webby will forget all about this now. I'd call out the show for having its characters not really learn from the mistakes of the past, but they do have a nice way of playing into this troubled past we all experienced before, with a nice personal moment between Beakley and Scrooge as he tries to convince her to be honest, something understandably difficult for a spy. But as we all know, Scrooge has kept similar secrets from his family, and it came very close to tearing them apart forever. It's not only another nice way for the show to play into its history in a way that feels natural and progressive, but it's a good way to lean into Scrooge and Beakley's relationship. They are probably the closest thing the other has to a true confidant. Even if they aren't completely honest with each other, they trust each other. Beakley trusted Scrooge to be a safe haven for her and Webby all these years, and now Scrooge is hoping that that trust will build a bridge to lower the walls that Beakley built many years ago before they're forced down. Too bad all that sentiment seems to have fallen on deaf ears. Well, he tried. This is where the episode was really pulling me in. Ever since it was revealed that Mrs. Beakley used to be an agent with Shush and later the freaking director, I've wondered what happened to make her go from being a secret agent to Scrooge McDuck's housekeeper. At this point, it was starting to become clear that, despite some skepticism on my end that we'd ever get to hear the story, we were finally going to get some idea of how and why that happened.
Wait, yep. Okay. Go!
But that's not the only bit of tension going on in this family. I mean, yeah, it's the most important, by a mile, but I think the subplot for this first part is worth talking about. See, Donald is planning to sail off with Daisy in the houseboat, just the two of them, and when Della hears about this, she doesn't take it well. Now, this is an interesting dilemma that I really wish got to be explored fully. Like with the incident with Lena, I understand why it didn't. The episode has so many moving parts that it's remarkable it flows at all, but that doesn't stop me from being a little disappointed that some things don't get as fleshed out as they could have been, especially since this is such a fitting problem for the Duck twins to have. Seeing Della be so contrarian and ultimately sad at the idea of Donald leaving makes a lot of sense. She's been gone for so long, and she's just starting to make up for lost time with her whole family, including her brother. But up until now, Donald's whole life while Della was away has been about his nephews, putting his life on hold to give his full attention to raising them. Now, he's not doing that alone. In fact, the boys hardly seem to need him anymore, which sounds sad, but it allows Donald to make life choices for himself, probably for the first time since Della disappeared, such as his budding relationship with Daisy. After dedicating so much of his life to taking care of his family, Donald has more than earned a leave of absence to do something for himself. And I'm sure the idea that even when they're apart, he knows where his sister is now and how to see her again, made it a much easier choice. It's a sweet side story, but again, one I wish we spent more time on. The time we did get with it might have meant more if we had had gotten more stories with Della and Donald in season 3, but they didn't get to spend nearly as much time together as I thought they would when they reunited. But this finale does come with some great background character antics, and Donald and Della get a lot of classic sibling moments during this last adventure as a result. So I suppose that almost makes up for the lack of focus before this. Back to the main story, May and June revealed their true intentions of stealing the remaining missing mysteries from the Duck family for Fowl.
Fiend, surprise.
Oh, and hey, the ensuing fight brings back the salvaged gummy berry juice. That's neat. But unfortunately, it looks like these girls had the advantage over Webby.
Sorry, June, but I have to find answers.
Oh, she's good. Things with Fowl escalate pretty quickly from here on out, so you know what that means. It's time to assemble a team of Ducktales' bravest and strongest heroes.
Unfortunately, these are the only guys I can find.
I kid, but like with the season finales before this, it's such a treat to get to see so many beloved characters come together to take on this looming threat to all of them. We even get to shake things up this time, in a refreshing twist from the usual tactic of stopping the kids from coming along on the dangerous mission, only to have them sneak along later. When they are determined to go, Scrooge welcomes them along. God, that was such a nice change of pace. These kids have more than proven that they can take care of themselves now, and it's nice to see their contributions be recognized right from the start. They're all a team, and now they're acting like it. A big part of what's so appealing about the season finales of DuckTales is seeing as many of the characters as possible come together to save the day, whether that be from a maniacal sorceress or an alien invasion. From cameos to co-ops, this is really where the last adventure shines. At times it can feel pretty chaotic, but I'd say it's a chaotic good. The team-ups they chose are really exciting and play on fan favorite dynamics, like getting to see the original adventure family of Scrooge, Donald, and Della fight off a bunch of eggheads, or the teamwork of Gyro's greatest creations that came with a single line that melted the hearts of every Astro Boy fan. You know it's true.
Look after your brother.
From seeing how much Lena has improved in her skills at magic, to the reveal that Ludwig von Drake is still alive because he was so busy he never got around to dying, a ridiculously cartoony explanation I absolutely love, to the reveal that Manny is the man horse of the apocalypse, it's pretty— wait, what was that last one? Okay, so I know parts of this finale are divisive, and that's fine, feel how you want, but one thing we all need to get on the same page about right now is that this was the most shocking twist of the episode, possibly of the entire series. I mean, I know Manny is a favorite character of Frank Angonis's, so I should have guessed he'd get a glow up at some point, but I just didn't expect it to be this, or for it to come with the long-awaited Gargoyles references. Wow, they kept that one in their back pocket until the very end. Though props for getting Goliath himself, Keith David, to play Manny once he can talk. Maybe I should finally get around to watching Gargoyles now. Let me know if I should watch Gargoyles, I hear good things. Once again, moments like these are where this finale shines. It's not fan service for the sake of it, it's celebrating everything the show has built up to this point and going all out. My favorite detail in this respect is back in part 1, where the group gets attacked and only Darkwing and Donald's hats catch on fire. Not only does this moment make me realize that the power of these two ducks' negative probability ions could probably demolish a city, so it's a good thing they don't hang out much, but showed me how much the team thought these implications through. If all these characters got together, what would happen? How would their dynamics be affected? How would they have to work around that and with each other? Most of it might not reach its full potential because of just how many characters there are, but a little goes a long way. The writers and animators made the most of the scenario in the time they had. It rewards the investment in the show up to this point with both tons of nods and details to the history it's created, and displaying the progression in skill and camaraderie in this expansive cast. Want proof of that? Well, think back to how much more trust Scrooge has in the kids now, or how Dewey makes the most of that trust by using his newly acquired piloting skills to face off against his rival Don Carnage in a one-on-one air battle. This should not be as cool as it is. Why is this so cool? Heck, look at how well Webby handles herself undercover in the heart of Fowl's organization. Not to mention how well Huey takes care of himself in this delicate situation navigating around Fowl's headquarters. Hidden in the Library of Alexandria. Okay, that's pretty cool too. Huey stowed away with May and June to, like Webby, get answers to the mystery behind what Fowl is planning, since he's been so obsessed with figuring out what Fowl is up to so he can hopefully think ahead of them and come out on top. Huey Huey's stubborn determination in this endeavor does also highlight some of his insecurities. How he finds being the slightest bit inadequate unacceptable as the smart one. One of the most well-known recurring elements in the show is that each season revolved around the personal journey of one of the triplets. Season 1 revolved around Dewey, Season 2 did the same for Louie, so for Season 3, it was Huey's turn. Now, Huey is my favorite of the triplets, so I was looking forward to how this would play out, and for the most part, it was pretty much what I was hoping for. I will admit Huey's character progression did get sidelined quite a bit this season due to everything else going on, which was kinda disappointing. However, I still think there were several moments showcasing Huey's strengths and weaknesses throughout this season. A big continuing trend was Huey's intellectual tendencies, leading to a desire for perfection, partly in the world, but mostly in himself. Understanding things is a way of controlling a situation in his favor, a desire that becomes blatantly obvious once he confronts Bradford in this finale.
Junior Woodchuck Rule 413. Never speak ill of a fellow woodchuck.
Oh wow, that is low, Bradford. This isn't a cheap trick either. Turns out Bradford was the very first Junior Woodchuck. That's a decent twist to get Bradford on Huey's level and try to make his argument more convincing. But man, does that uniform look all sorts of wrong on him. But it's a tactic that almost works. If this season is meant to center around Huey's character development, then how does Bradford fit into that? Well, as I mentioned, a lot of Huey's conflict comes from trying to use knowledge to obtain control, and that's pretty much exactly what Bradford's been doing for all these years with Fowl. In a way, Bradford is a dark reflection of what Huey could become if he continues to think that being the smartest means you have all the right answers, that your way is the only way, and that the only way to maintain order is to take matters into your own hands. Huey's desire for knowledge and general hubris is what he has to overcome here before Bradford can convince him that his way is the best way for everyone, to let knowledge light the way to a brighter tomorrow. But before it's too late, Huey sees what that future looks like. Friends and allies locked away simply because they chose to approach things differently. It's only once Huey sees the dangers of what trying to control the world around him means, what that sense of superiority could turn him into, does he defy that. The moment where Huey realizes all of this is kind of short-lived, which is unfortunate given how good I think the build-up is a few scenes prior, but I think the theme still gets across rather well. As the season went on, while there were good plot lines dedicated to Huey, I was having trouble seeing how this could tie into the finale like what his brothers got. In the end, I think it comes together with the plot revolving around Fowl and Bradford pretty well. Could it have been better? Absolutely. But I still think they got what they wanted to across. Searching for knowledge is a worthwhile pursuit, but it's all a matter of how you apply it to your life experiences. Like how Dewey and Louie use the Junior Woodchuck guidebook to find Huey when he's captured. This is the ultimate test put forth in part 2 of The Last Adventure, for both Huey and Webby. How far should you be willing to go to discover the truth? And what is worth sacrificing and compromising to get those answers? By the end of this part, Huey finds out where he draws the line. He sees what going too far looks like, and he never wants to get anywhere close to what Bradford has convinced himself is the smart thing to do. Webby, on the other hand... Okay, so Webby goes undercover to find out how she's connected to Fowl and their plans, why May and June were cloned from her, and what her past has to do with any of this. The only way she's able to get these answers, or at least most of them, is by interrogating Beakley while still in disguise. Wow. For the most part, this episode was a big ol' thrill ride, but there are points where it's freaking intense. This is one of them. We learn that Webby is some sort of experiment created by Fowl that Beakley stole while on a mission to take the organization down. Instead of completing that mission, she decided to dedicate her life to protecting this innocent child by going deep undercover and taking her to the safest place she could think of where she'd be allowed to watch over her, McDuck Manor. So, even though it's been hinted at for a while that Beakley was keeping some big secret from the family, especially Webby, I don't think anyone predicted this. If this was your working theory around Webby and Beakley, congratulations, you are far more clever than I. That said, this reveal certainly explains a lot. Why Beakley kept Webby in hiding, how Webby's so skilled, why Beakley trained her so intensely to take care of herself in life or death situations, despite apparently never needing to leave the mansion of an, at the time, known recluse. At this point, everything was adding up on Webby's side of the story. However, to Webby, it's an earth-shattering amount of information that reveals her whole life has been centered around a lie, making her very vulnerable. Possibly the most vulnerable she's been in the series, and thus more susceptible to Bradford's convincing ways than Huey was, agreeing to help them if it means she'll know once and for all why she was created.
Welcome home, April.
Oh, she's April. Yeah, that makes more sense. While the kind of heel-face turn Webby experiences here can usually be very looked down on by an audience, I appreciate that, as far as I saw, most viewers didn't judge Webby for going along with what Val asked her to do. As far as she's concerned, her entire world has been turned upside down. The only person she thought she could trust lied about who she was and the nature of their relationship. This would be a lot to process for anyone, but for a kid like Webby, this is immense. As we enter part 3, Webby is now a pawn in Bradford's ultimate plan. She doesn't have to do anything like fight or confront anyone in her found family, but does play a part in Bradford's mission to dismantle them. Once he has everything he needs, we finally, after all this time, get a clear-cut idea of what Bradford's ultimate solution to ending the chaos of adventure is. And boy, is it complicated. Let me lay this out as best I can, but bear with me, dear viewers, there's a lot of moving parts here. The catalyst for this plan seems to be when he lost the papyrus of binding. To get it back under the conditions Scrooge set, he attempts to clone an heir that he can manipulate to get the missing mystery back. When Shush dropped a wrench in that plan, he waited around for 10 years or so, recruiting new members of his organization, sabotaging Scrooge's operation from the inside as an investor, all that good stuff. Eventually, he tricks Scrooge and the fam into finding the missing mysteries, which he then has Fowl steal and utilize to varying levels of practicality, including to create May and June, because whatever he used to create Webby, I guess wasn't viable anymore. Whatever. Seriously, the practicality of gathering all the missing mysteries is all over the place. Some are brought back and weaponized in creative ways, others feel like they could have been swapped out for anything else. But anyway, right now we only care about 2 missing mysteries, the Sligo Circuit and the Papyrus of Binding, which Bradford succeeds in obtaining thanks to Webby. It's a pretty shocking moment, yet I somehow did not put together what it meant that she was able to do that in that moment. But we'll get back to that later. Bradford realized that if he couldn't destroy Scrooge's spirit of adventure through subterfuge or by breaking his morale, he would instead take the direct approach, forcing Scrooge to sign away his adventurous ways on the papyrus in the hopes that that will end the chaos of the world once and for all. And any other chaotic forces that managed to thrive without Scrooge McDuck, he'd actively destroy with the dimensional force of the Sligo Circuit.
And that's your plan, is it?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's way more elaborate than I expected too. I mean, don't get me wrong, it makes sense. As far as I recall, they've accounted for every bit of foreshadowing throughout season 3 and beyond. They even finally explained what the deal was with those other buzzards who hang around Bradford. They're just failed clones of him. I guess that explains why they never talked. I commend the writing team for weaving all these moving parts into something comprehensive, but boy, is it a lot to take in an already massive and ambitious final adventure. For crying out loud, it's all but said that Bradford was responsible for Duckworth's death, and the poor butler only gets a PowerPoint slide as a reveal. I wouldn't say it's bad, far from it, it's just a lot to take in, and laying it all out maybe was a bit more than was really needed to carry this plan out. And that's not even getting into Bradford's motivation. We've talked about Bradford's beliefs and reasoning for doing all this before, but this is where we learn why he holds these beliefs in the first place. As it turns out, this disdain has been a part of him most of his life, ever since he went on treasure hunting adventures with his grandmother, Isabella Finch, confirming a decently popular fan theory at the time. While this might sound like a familiar scenario, unlike the kid Scrooge lets tag along with him on globe-trotting adventures, who for the most part loved them, Bradford was terrified and frustrated by them. A frustration that only grew as he did, where he looked into the damages caused by antics like these, mostly financially because it's Bradford we're talking about here. So he dedicated his life to suppressing anything that could be seen as chaotic, which eventually led to him zeroing in on the greatest chaotic force he has seen in his life, Scrooge McDuck. Now, before I say anything else, let me be clear about one thing. Bradford is an amazing villain. Being able to plot this out and do such despicable, underhanded things virtually undetected for decades is a criminal mastermind storyline at its finest. The idea that he doesn't see himself as a villain only adds to the delusions and makes it even better to watch as Bradford continues to declare that he's doing the right thing without any sense of doubt. He knows what the right thing to do is, and everyone else is wrong about his intentions. That said, there is something about Bradford's worldview that I've been wanting to get off my chest since we first realized what it was. Given how wide-reaching Scrooge's influence is, I get how Bradford sees him as a threat to his goal, as someone who only creates more of the thing he hates. But pitting the blame for every chaotic and eccentric force in this world on Scrooge is, for a brilliant adversary like Bradford, incredibly short-sighted. Scrooge may stir the pot and encourage challenges from powerful individuals, but as we went over in the last episode, he's not responsible for their actions. Despite what Bradford claimed in his little outburst back in Let's Get Dangerous, Magica still would have been a maniacal sorceress, Lunaris would have planned his invasion with or without Scrooge, and guess who put all reality in jeopardy, Mr. Busybeak? Your hired help. Back when Bradford was trying to convince Huey to help him, he started planting doubts in his head about how Scrooge conducts his adventures, and while that is a fair discussion to have, that is a hard look that Bradford needs to take as well. But what makes him the villain is the fact that he never will. Given what we've learned about the extent of Bradford's interference over the years and how his actions are just as guilty of causing chaos, this world-conquering crusade of his is pretty hypocritical. By that logic, it kinda makes sense why Scrooge's trial was the episode before this one. It sets up this idea that it's tough to pin fault on major events like this on a single individual. It's all cause and effect. But Bradford refuses to accept that and stands firm in his belief that if he can destroy Scrooge, the world will be filled with order and financial gain, and he will assure that all on his own if he has to, using the Sword of Swansontein to get a pretty sick-looking black and red suit of armor with the logo of his shadowy organization as freaking shoulder pads. But you know, he's totally not a villain. It does say a lot about the kind of villain Bradford is when he takes a relic that can shape reality according to what's written on it and turns it into a literal binding contract. I really like that. That was a neat twist. But you know, with all this hot air Bradford's been blowing about what Scrooge's influence over the world has caused, I kinda wish we got a glimpse into what the world would look like after Scrooge signed the contract. Would it be a dull place and Scrooge would work to break the contract to bring adventure and passion back to the world? Or would it change very little and Bradford would have to be faced with the reality that you can't stop a natural force of the universe? Ah well, guess we'll never know. Scrooge literally being chained to the ground is just as effective. I'll tell you one thing though, the closer Bradford gets to achieving his goal, the more he shows how utterly ruthless he truly is. He's upgraded to actively threatening the lives of others for leverage, and you know that contradiction I pointed out in Bradford's mission statement? That for someone who wants to expel all chaos from the world, he seems to recruit a lot of chaotic people? Something Scrooge even points out? Well, it turns out he has a solution to that little problem when, with no hesitation or remorse, he tosses his clones and Black Heron into a swirling vortex of death. But again, he's not the villain. But even that wasn't the most despicable thing Bradford has done. This was.
And nothing can tear us apart.
I've torn you apart once before. How do you think Della found out you built the Spear of Selene?
Okay, you grab this arm, now you take my leg. Let me at him! Let me at him!
That was somehow a bigger gut punch than the reveal concerning Duckworth, and it's the moment where Bradford quite possibly became one of the most vicious and underhanded villains in Disney television history. It all demonstrates a level of arrogance and stubbornness unmatched by any antagonist in the Ducktales reboot, and that's really saying something. Presenting how our villain will steamroll anything that gets in the way of his decades-long, unwavered mission. Compare that to our heroes, who have all changed so much in the short time since the series began. Before we head into the big climax, let's talk a bit about one of the subplots of this finale, where the heroes are super in nature. Yeah, you didn't think I forgot about this group, did you? Out of all the different team-ups in this three-parter, you can bet I was most excited about finally getting to see Gizmo Duck work with Darkwing Duck. From an entertainment standpoint, it's almost everything I wanted. The moments of Fenton unintentionally showing up Drake are really funny, and the few times where they're able to cooperate and kick some bad guy butt together are so great. Admittedly, the joke of Drake not being able to put together that Fenton is Gizmo Duck was funny at first, but it did start to get on my nerves the more they leaned into it. But just when it seems like Fenton is about to lose his patience with it right alongside me, Drake turns it into a pretty sentimental moment.
I am not alone in this. You don't have to do everything yourself.
This was kind of sweet. As much animosity as Drake has towards Gizmo Duck, he's a good friend to Fenton, who knows he's dealing with a lot of guilt and responsibility right now, even if he doesn't know the full extent of what he's going through. Fenton's been the only superhero on the show for a long time, but now there are others to carry the burden. It's a small moment, but I think it spoke to a lot. Or maybe I just read too much into everything involving Fenton because he's my favorite. Who knows? But our local superheroes are put out of commission pretty quickly, as are several other powerful supporting characters, leaving only one to stand up against the threats they face: Launchpad.
Well, we're boned!
It's no secret that Launchpad has been one of the most divisive characters in the Ducktales reboot, the levels of tolerability for his naive to downright idiotic nature varying greatly from episode to episode. Oftentimes he feels more like a liability to an adventure than an asset, something he starts to realize himself when he's on this mission with tons of people who have strong skills and powers to contribute, which is tough to dispute when the biggest thing he does before part 3 is give away the kid's position to the enemy, which is why when the chips were down, I did not expect him to get perhaps the most triumphant moment in the episode. Launchpad's value doesn't typically come from his own skills, but through the potential he sees in others, being responsible for inspiring people who would become actual superheroes and his close friends. An observation I made a while back, and I cannot tell you how validating it was to hear the show echo it.
You helped inspire me to be a hero. And me, pal.
Launchpad may not be the smartest, toughest, or sharpest member of the cast, but over the course of the show, he's inspired so many others to be their best selves. So to see all those people now do the same for him in his hour of need was a very uplifting moment that really stood out to me in this finale. Almost as much as the moment where Launchpad gets to pilot the Gizmo suit, which I don't think has ever happened to even the original show. You can feel free to correct me on that though. It was pretty cool and unexpected, and also funny when it turns out he can't really fly the thing. Because of course he can't. He's Launchpad. That's kind of how this goes. Well, either way, he stops the bad guys and frees everyone from the boxes Fowl put them in. Hooray! Wait a minute.
Maybe they're like putting people in boxes?
Once again, those clever ducks. Every now and then, Launchpad does know what he's talking about. This is why we keep him around. Well, Launchpad didn't save everyone. A select few are still held captive by May and June, including the triplets and Webby, where, after being filled in on what Bradford's plan was this whole time, they realized the last big twist the show has up its sleeve.
May and June were made from Webby. Who is Webby made from?
From me.
Bradford needed Scrooge's descendant, so he made one.
She's my daughter.
The reveal that Webby was cloned from Scrooge, technically making her his daughter, was definitely the biggest talking point coming out of this finale. It wasn't a unanimous reaction, mind you. I saw a lot of mixed feelings about this choice. While some were on board with it, even thinking it was kind of cute, others were concerned that this breaks the found family theme that's been prevalent in the show. That it makes Webby's relationship to Scrooge and the triplets one of blood instead of bond. But I don't think the message of choosing your family is lost just because Webby is biologically related to the Duck family. Just because Webby's relationship to her family is different from what we thought, that shouldn't automatically invalidate the family is the one you choose message the show has been going for all this time. What about Webby's sisterly bond with Lena and Violet? What about Drake and Gosselin, Gyro and Boyd, Della and the Moonlanders, Launchpad and, well, everyone? What about Mrs. Beakley, who has no relation to Webby but sacrificed everything to look out for her and keep her safe? While their relationship is tarnished at first by Webby's initial feelings of betrayal, by the end of the episode, it's clear that she still loves Beakley, her granny, as much as she ever has. This twist doesn't devalue all the deep personal connections of love and friendship made throughout the course of the show. Or at least it shouldn't. Even having relationships with your biological family is a choice, one that takes work, sacrifice, and dedication. Something else the show has made very clear since day one. Scrooge didn't start taking Donald and Della on adventures just because they were his niece and nephew, or the triplets just because they were his grandnephews, but because it was a form of bonding that made them all closer, made his life better, and he wanted to embrace those feelings. The biggest running theme of the DuckTales reboot has been the difficulties that can come with being part of a big, eccentric family. Through years of betrayals, separation, the input of additional members, and ultimately, the effort and change needed to mend broken relationships. Is it possible? Certainly, but not not without the desire to keep those connections alive and the growth and compromise it'll take to maintain them. And we've seen what kind of progress can be made through all that work. Like when Scrooge doesn't hesitate for a second to sign the contract once Donald's life is put at risk.
You have to the count of 5. 1.
All right, I'll do it.
Compare this to how they could barely talk to each other without an argument in the first episode. Yes, it's a cliche move, but the way it's executed and knowing the history between this uncle and nephew also speaks volumes about how Scrooge feels towards Donald, and frankly, it's a confirmation of those feelings that's long overdue. You don't have to like the idea that Webby is Scrooge's daughter, but the detractors of this reveal make it seem like this contradicts everything the show has been about up to this point, when in reality, it's reinforcing it. Webby and Scrooge didn't know that they were related, but they grew to love each other as family regardless. And it's clear that that's not going to change. It'll only make their connection stronger. Willing to protect and cherish who you really care about is what really matters in a family, whether in blood or bond, which Webby sums up in a far less long-winded way than I just did right after this is revealed.
Family would do anything to keep you safe and sacrifice everything to love you, no matter who or what you are.
This whole finale has been presenting the strength and the connections forged during the Ducktales reboot. Many of these people were alone, isolated, or misunderstood. Now, they stand together to help the person who brought them all together, Scrooge McDuck. The adventure will never end as long as there's something to fight for, which infuriates Bradford and turns him into a 50-foot-tall rage monster. But he's not a villain. He's certainly not a villain. But if Black Heron hadn't just been obliterated from existence at his hands, I bet she'd be proud. Up until the very end, Bradford's unmoving mindset is what blinds him to the ultimate loophole in the so-called binding contract. And it's... well... just play the clip.
Scrooge can be with his family as long as he does an adventure. But family is the greatest adventure of all!
Yes, the contract being broken by family being the greatest adventure of all is incredibly corny. Perhaps the corniest the show has ever been. But since it's been the sentiment of the show since the very beginning, you could argue it was a foreshadowed conclusion.
Family truly is the greatest adventure of all. Oh no, the ground!
Though I think they could have found a better way to convey that contradiction myself. In its current form, it feels kind of abrupt after everything we've been through to get here, but again, it does make sense in the logic of the show. Still, the moment where the whole adventure family stands together against the buzzard who tried to tear them apart is a pretty epic sight. So, for this special occasion, let's have one last 10th Doctor clip.
You act like such a lonely man. But look at you. You've got the biggest family on Earth.
Luckily, Bradford's stubbornness doesn't go completely unpunished. Watching him be turned into a mindless pet whisked away with the show's villains, who are very unashamed to call themselves villains, is a pretty good way for him to get his comeuppance as far as I'm concerned. With all restored to the way it was, the adventure family is reunited and heads home. This world may still be filled with chaos and unpredictability, but together, this is a group who will get through it all just fine. The show does end on a nice note, but part of me really wishes there was more of an epilogue. So much happened on this last adventure, I'd love to check in on everyone one last time once they all got home. With all the reunions and revelations that would make their family life richer, driving them forward. If there was only one thing I could change about this episode, it would be this. But I don't know, maybe that's just my ever-persistent desire to have as much closure as possible before a show ends talking. Besides, Ducktales does have a pretty cute idea for a curtain call, with the cast getting to fly alongside the credits as they scroll by. It was a nice way for everyone to get a chance to see their favorite character one last time. Plus, it's really well animated. And with that, the DuckTales 2017 reboot ends. Overall, The Last Adventure is indeed the biggest and most ambitious adventure the series has ever attempted. They clearly wanted to go out with a bang, and I'd say they did. It's not perfect. At times it can feel a bit bloated, convoluted, and rushes through things that have been building up for a really long time to get to the bigger set pieces of this conclusion, but it never wavers on the fun and heart at the core of the show. I know I made that comparison to this finale being like when Disney Channel shows would get movies, and and if you put the whole runtime plus commercials together, that is about what you'd get. But watching this again broken up into 3 episodes on Disney Plus, I actually think it works better that way. Or at the very least, it feels way less chaotic broken up into 3 stories rather than one giant one. It's really tough to have a series finale be universally satisfying. It's where expectations are at their highest. This will be the last episode of a show viewers have invested a lot of time and energy into. So depending on what a satisfying end to such a long story looks like to you, your feelings on the end result will vary. And DuckTales is no exception here. I remember people were frustrated at things like how the finale focuses way too much on Webby at the expense of almost everyone else, and like we talked about, some felt the revelations in the story did contradict the show's overall message. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't share some of those grievances at the time the finale aired. With so many characters to highlight, when you put too much focus on one, it can make the others feel overshadowed, especially when that one is, by all accounts, not the main character. But with time and giving the episode a couple more viewings, I'd say it's as well balanced as it could have been with how much they had to do with the story and characters in the time they had. You could argue that's a burden they put on themselves, but personally, I appreciate that they attempt to give every character at least one moment to shine, knowing this will likely be the last time we see any of them. Unless we get that Darkwing reboot off the ground. Huh? Please? The animation is expressive, the locations are grand, the story is captivating in just how ambitious it is, keeping up a breakneck pace while only stumbling a couple of times, the tension is constant and genuinely suspenseful at points until the final victory is achieved, and the bonds between this massive cast are put through their ultimate test and only get stronger as a result. Like I said, I personally would have been more satisfied with this finale if we had gotten an epilogue of some kind where we checked in on everyone on their new and familiar paths in life. The more things change, the more they stay the same, etc, etc. But I'm shocked at how well they did resolve all this for the most part, going out on a pretty high note. Not the highest the show has achieved, but still a pretty high one. With how large and well personified the DuckTales supporting cast is, they could have kept this going for several more seasons, Friendship is Magic style. But no, 3 seasons is a default these days, I guess. Well, I can say with absolute certainty that the DuckTales reboot made the most of this rewritten history while unraveling its many mysteries. Something I did not imagine I'd be saying when the show was announced. Like I've said several times over the course of my time with the DuckTales reboot, I didn't care about the original DuckTales, but this reboot did everything in its power to draw me in and give a damn about it, then proceeded to keep me hooked until the very end, unwaveringly invested in its moments of excitement, creativity, absurdity, challenge, triumph, love, and most of all, adventure. I expected to like DuckTales 2017, but I couldn't begin to imagine during that 24-hour marathon where the show premiered how important it would become to me. This review will be my 25th video dedicated to DuckTales, and I'm sure it's how a lot of you watching this discovered my channel, which I am incredibly grateful for. I love this show so much. I have invested a lot of time and dedication to the show and the fandom at large, which has been an absolute blast. And it's still almost a year later, weird to think that, as far as the show goes, that amazing surprise of an adventure is over. To those of you who discovered my channel through my DuckTales reviews, or those of you who didn't but enjoyed them along my other content, thank you so much for your support and enthusiasm through this unexpectedly meaningful journey. I can only hope those of you who are here for the DuckTales reviews will stick around to see what else I'll have coming up on the channel. I promise there's some new, exciting stuff coming your guys' way. This journey may be over, but if DuckTales taught me anything, is that there are many more exciting adventures out there to discover. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of the finale in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. Special thanks to OGs for providing his music to this review. You can hear the full version of this song and all of his other original songs themed around DuckTales, Amphibia, and more over on his channel, which will be linked up above and in the description, so go show him some love. And of course, very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including David L. Sproul, Sebastian Canino of Cinemageddon Reviews, Chelsea A. Crandall, Hawk Hero, Crowless, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.